In 1861, America tore itself apart. Brothers became enemies. Cities turned into battlegrounds. Over 600,000 would die, not for foreign conquest, but over the soul of a nation. This is the story of the American Civil War, the founding of the United States, the seeds of a divided nation. The birth of the United States in 1776 marked the beginning of a bold experiment in self-government, grounded in Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and natural rights. However, from its very inception, the American Republic was a nation of paradoxes. The same men who declared all men are created equal also owned slaves. The structure of government they designed was one of carefully negotiated balances between large and small states, the federal government and state authority, liberty and order. But one fissure ran especially deep: slavery. The compromises and contradictions embedded in the nation's founding documents would later erupt into sectional conflict, secession, and civil war. The Declaration of Independence and the ideals of liberty. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, primarily authored by Thomas Jefferson. Its opening lines have become immortal. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." These words signaled a revolutionary break from monarchy and a commitment to universal principles of liberty, equality, and individual rights. Yet in practice, these ideals were selectively applied. Jefferson himself was a slaveholder. Many of the signers owned enslaved people and did not see a contradiction between proclaiming freedom and maintaining human bondage. Still, the Declaration of Independence introduced enduring political concepts. Natural rights. Individuals possess rights by virtue of being human, not by government grant. Popular sovereignty. Legitimate power resides with the people, not kings or elites. Right of revolution. People have the right to overthrow unjust governments. These ideas resonated across the Atlantic world, inspiring revolutions in France, Haiti, and Latin America. In the United States, however, they created a troubling contradiction. How could a republic dedicated to liberty tolerate slavery? This contradiction became a growing source of tension, especially between the North, which would gradually move toward abolition, and the South, where slavery was deeply entrenched in the economy and culture. The U.S. Constitution and the Compromise on Slavery. After winning independence from Britain, the new nation faced internal disarray under the Articles of Confederation, a loose union that gave states nearly all power. To resolve this, delegates convened in Philadelphia in 1787 to create a stronger federal government, resulting in the U.S. Constitution. But crafting the Constitution required navigating sectional differences, especially on slavery. Though never explicitly using the word slavery, the Constitution made several crucial compromises that protected and legitimized the institution. 1. The Three-Fifths Compromise. Southern states demanded that their enslaved populations be counted toward representation in Congress. Northern delegates opposed counting people who had no rights or citizenship. The compromise counted each enslaved person as 3/5 of a person for both taxation and representation. And Electoral College. This inflated Southern political power, allowing slaveholding presidents and pro-slavery legislation to dominate for decades. 2. The Fugitive Slave Clause, Article 4, Section 2. This clause required that enslaved people who escaped to free states shall be delivered up to their owners. It gave legal backing to the idea that enslaved people were property, and that states had to cooperate in preserving slavery, even if slavery was illegal within their own borders. 3. Protection of the slave trade until 1808. Article 1, Section 9 prevented Congress from banning the importation of slaves until 1808. Southern delegates insisted on this clause to ensure the transatlantic slave trade could continue for at least 20 more years. Federal versus state power, fragile foundations. One of the most contentious debates in early American politics was how to divide power between the federal government and the states, a debate that would evolve into the issue of states' rights, central to the Civil War. The Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, wanted a strong central government capable of managing national debt, regulating commerce, and maintaining order. The Anti-Federalists, including Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry, feared centralized tyranny and defended state sovereignty. This division led to several foundational compromises and structures. A bicameral legislature, the Senate gave equal power to each state, regardless of population, while the House of Representatives reflected population size. The 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights, 1791, reserved powers not delegated to the federal government to the states, reinforcing their autonomy. Creation of a Supreme Court to interpret constitutional disputes, often involving federal versus state authority. Throughout the early republic, these tensions simmered. In the 1798 Alien and Sedition Acts, Jefferson and Madison responded with the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, which claimed states could nullify federal laws they deemed unconstitutional, a principle that would later fuel Southern secession. The nullification crisis of 1832, led by South Carolina, would revive this debate, asserting state power over federal tariffs. The founders never fully resolved the federal-state power divide. Instead, they built a system of compromise and ambiguity that left slavery's legal status and territorial expansion up for ongoing battle: the Northwest Ordinance and slavery's westward expansion. While the Constitution institutionalized slavery, another foundational document, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, hinted at a different future. Passed under the Articles of Confederation and reaffirmed under the Constitution, the ordinance set the terms for settling and governing the Northwest Territory, modern-day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. Key provisions included orderly expansion. The ordinance established how territories could become states, requiring population thresholds and guarantees of Republican government. Ban on slavery. Article 6 of the ordinance declared that there shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the Northwest Territory. This was a significant precedent. It showed that Congress could regulate slavery in federal territories. It also signaled that new states might be free states, unsettling Southern slaveholders who feared being outnumbered and losing control in Congress. Yet the ordinance also created complications. Slaveholders moving into the Northwest Territory brought enslaved people anyway, and local authorities often turned a blind eye. Southern states argued that Congress had no right to restrict the expansion of slavery, a viewpoint that would resurface in the Missouri Compromise debates, 1820, and again in the 1850s with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Most critically, the Northwest Ordinance introduced the idea that the spread of slavery was a national issue, not just a regional or local one. Every new territory acquired by the U.S. would become a new battleground between pro- and anti-slavery factions. Early conflicts and factionalism. In the first decades of the new republic, political factions quickly formed around divergent visions of America. Federalists, Hamilton, Adams, favored commerce, banking, a strong federal government, and alignment with Britain. Democratic Republicans, Jefferson, Madison, advocated for agrarianism, states' rights, westward expansion, and a decentralized government. While these factions were not yet rigidly divided over slavery, geographic patterns began to emerge. Northern states moved toward gradual abolition, while Southern states tightened their grip on slave labor. Key developments included the 1793 Fugitive Slave Act, passed by Congress, gave teeth to the Fugitive Slave Clause and sparked early tensions between free and slave states. The Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804, a successful slave uprising, terrified white Southerners and hardened their attitudes toward any anti-slavery rhetoric. The emergence of free black communities in northern cities and early abolitionist societies laid the groundwork for an eventual anti-slavery movement. The founding generation hoped that slavery might wither away on its own. But instead of fading, it became more entrenched, especially with the invention of the cotton gin in 1793, which made slave labor exponentially more profitable in the South. Conclusion: a nation built on compromise and conflict. The founding of the United States was a remarkable achievement in political theory and governance. But it was also an enterprise deeply marked by moral compromise. The lofty ideals of the Declaration of Independence coexisted with the legal protections of human bondage enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. The early republic was torn between visions of liberty and realities of oppression, between the autonomy of states and the authority of a national government. The Northwest Ordinance demonstrated that the issue of slavery would haunt every effort to expand the nation. The Constitution's compromises ensured that slavery would remain at the center of American political life, giving it legitimacy and protection until the sectional crisis could no longer be contained. These founding contradictions did not cause the Civil War by themselves, but they laid the structural and ideological groundwork for the conflicts that would eventually erupt. In their attempt to create a more perfect union, the founders built a republic that was already divided, and the cost of holding that union together would be paid in blood nearly a century later. Rise of sectionalism, North versus South, a house divided. By the early 19th century, the United States was growing rapidly in size, population, and ambition. But as the country expanded westward and developed economically, stark divisions began to emerge between its two major regions, the industrializing North and the agrarian, slave-dependent South. These divisions were not merely economic, but extended into politics, culture, and ideology. Over time, what began as regional differences hardened into sectionalism, a loyalty to one's region rather than to the nation as a whole. This rise in sectionalism would gradually unravel the fragile compromises of the founding era and push the country towards civil war. Economic divergence, industrial North versus agrarian South. The North and South followed vastly different economic paths after the American Revolution. The North, industry and wage labor. By the early 1800s, the North was undergoing a profound transformation through the Industrial Revolution. Factories, especially in New England and the mid-Atlantic states, were producing textiles, tools, and manufactured goods. Cities like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia became centers of finance, shipping, and commerce. A growing class of wage laborers worked in mills and factories, often under poor conditions but without slavery. A diversified economy and growing infrastructure, canals, railroads, telegraphs, helped integrate the North into a national and increasingly global market. The South, agriculture and slavery. The South remained heavily agrarian, depending on plantation agriculture for its wealth. The invention of the cotton gin in 1793 made cotton the dominant cash crop, especially in the Deep South. Southern elites relied on a vast system of enslaved labor to maintain the profitability of their plantations. Unlike the North, the South remained rural, with fewer cities and limited industrial development. Wealth and power in the South were concentrated in the hands of a small planter aristocracy, which fiercely defended slavery as essential to their economic and social order. This economic divergence created competing interests. The North supported modernization, wage labor, and internal improvements, while the South resisted changes that might threaten their plantation economy and slave system. Cultural and social differences. Beyond economics, the North and South developed distinct social values, educational priorities, and cultural identities. North, reform and progress. The North saw a surge in public education, urbanization, and immigration. The Second Great Awakening inspired numerous reform movements, including abolitionism, temperance, and women's rights. Northern society, while far from egalitarian, embraced the idea of social mobility, hard work, and moral progress. Abolitionists, especially in New England, began to see slavery not just as a Southern issue, but a national moral crisis. South. Tradition and hierarchy. Southern society was rooted in tradition, honor, and a rigid racial hierarchy. Education was less widespread, and many poor whites had limited access to schooling. Southern elites promoted the idea that slavery was not a moral evil, but a positive good, essential to civilization and white supremacy. Religion in the South became more aligned with pro-slavery interpretations of Christianity, in contrast to the more reformist evangelicalism in the North. These cultural differences shaped how each region viewed the future of the nation. The North increasingly saw the South's dependence on slavery as backward and unjust, while the South saw Northern reformers as dangerous radicals threatening their way of life. Tariffs, banking, and internal improvements. While slavery was the core issue underlying sectionalism, debates over economic policy further widened the rift between North and South. Tariffs. The federal government imposed protective tariffs to shield Northern manufacturers from foreign competition. Tariffs like the Tariff of Abominations, 1828, were deeply unpopular in the South, which relied on imported goods and feared retaliatory tariffs against their cotton exports. Southern leaders viewed high tariffs as a form of economic exploitation, where the federal government served Northern industrial interests at the South's expense. Banking. The North generally supported a national bank to stabilize currency and encourage economic development. The South, especially Andrew Jackson and his supporters, distrusted central banking as an elite conspiracy and a threat to agrarian independence. The Bank War of the 1830s was a symbolic struggle between North and South over economic control and class power. Internal improvements. The North supported federally funded infrastructure projects, canals, educational projects, canashes, and educational improvements, railroads, roads, to support commerce and connect markets. The South often opposed such measures, arguing that they favored the North and exceeded the federal government's constitutional powers. When Southern states were asked to help fund projects that would primarily benefit Northern industry, resistance was fierce. Together, these disputes revealed a deeper issue: the South's fear of being economically and politically dominated by a more populous, rapidly modernizing North. Southern fears of losing political dominance. As the North's population and economic power grew, the balance of power in Congress began to tilt. The South, once politically dominant, began to see itself as a besieged minority, increasingly isolated and vulnerable. Political balance in the Senate. The South's power had long been protected by the Senate, where each state had equal representation. As new states joined the Union, fierce debates erupted over whether they would be free or slave states. The South feared that if the North gained a Senate majority, it would eventually legislate slavery out of existence. The House and Electoral College. The North's growing population gave it an advantage in the House of Representatives and Electoral College. Southern leaders believed their ability to elect sympathetic presidents was slipping, especially as anti-slavery voices gained ground in the North. The rise of abolitionism. By the 1830s, abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass were publishing powerful critiques of slavery. Southern newspapers and politicians denounced these efforts as incitement to rebellion and terrorism. The Gag Rule in Congress, 1836 to 1844, which banned discussion of abolitionist petitions, showed how fragile the political consensus had become. The fear of a hostile federal government. The South's worst nightmare was a federal government. Conclusion: sectionalism becomes a crisis. By the 1840s and 1850s, sectionalism had become more than a difference of opinion. It was a full-blown political and cultural crisis. The North and South no longer saw each other as mere rivals, but as opposing civilizations. Each side believed its way of life was under threat from the other. The North believed in a future of free labor, industrial growth, and expanding democracy. The South believed in preserving its agrarian economy, racial hierarchy, and the right to own human beings. As these visions collided in Congress, in newspapers, and in public sentiment, the American experiment in unity became increasingly unstable. Sectionalism was not just a disagreement over policy. It was a profound clash of identities, values, and visions for the future of the United States. The Civil War would be the violent resolution of a conflict that had been building since the country's founding. The institution of slavery, a nation built on bondage. Slavery was not a Southern anomaly. It was a foundational element of the American economy and society from colonial times through the mid-19th century. While the founders had hoped the institution would fade, it instead expanded rapidly, especially after technological innovations made slave labor even more profitable. As slavery grew more entrenched, it also became more brutal, sparking fierce resistance from both the enslaved and those committed to their liberation. The institution of slavery was not only an economic system, but a moral battleground that would ultimately divide the country and lead it toward war. Slavery's growth after the cotton gin. The invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793 transformed Southern agriculture and ensured the survival and explosive growth of slavery in the United States. The cotton boom. The cotton gin made it dramatically easier to separate cotton fibers from seeds, turning cotton into a highly profitable crop. Demand for king cotton soared, both domestically and abroad, especially in British textile mills. Southern states such as Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas became new frontiers of cotton cultivation, leading to what became known as the Cotton Kingdom. Expansion of slavery. As cotton plantations spread, so too did the demand for enslaved laborers. The domestic slave trade expanded massively. More than 1 million enslaved people were forcibly relocated from the Upper South, Virginia, Maryland, to the Deep South. Families were torn apart in slave auctions, as enslaved people were treated as commodities to be bought, sold, or mortgaged. By 1860, over 4 million enslaved African Americans lived in the United States, nearly 1 in 3 Southerners. This economic expansion solidified the South's dependence on slavery and created an elite planter class with a vested interest in preserving and expanding the institution at all costs. Slave codes and daily life under slavery. The life of an enslaved person was characterized by brutality, control, and constant surveillance. To maintain the system, Southern states enforced slave codes, laws designed to restrict every aspect of an enslaved person's life. Legal and physical oppression. Enslaved people could not own property, enter contracts, testify against whites, legally marry, or learn to read and write. Any form of resistance, whether escape, disobedience, or self-defense, could be met with severe punishment: whipping, branding, imprisonment, or execution. Patrols and militias monitored plantations and towns to catch runaways and suppress revolts. Daily life and labor. Most enslaved people worked from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week, primarily in cotton, sugar, and tobacco fields. Others were domestic workers, blacksmiths, carpenters, or skilled artisans, often working in harsh conditions with no rights or compensation. Living conditions were poor: crowded cabins, inadequate food, minimal clothing, and frequent abuse. Resistance and culture. Despite the oppression, enslaved people developed rich cultural, spiritual, and familial traditions. Spirituals and songs encoded messages of resistance and hope. Religion, particularly Christianity, was a source of both solace and subversion. Preachers like Nat Turner interpreted the Bible as a call to resist injustice. Family bonds, while constantly under threat from sale and separation, were cherished and carefully preserved. Even in bondage, enslaved people asserted their humanity and resilience, undermining pro-slavery arguments that they were content or inferior. The abolitionist movement, voices of conscience. As slavery grew in the South, so too did opposition in the North. A diverse group of abolitionists emerged in the early 19th century, committed to ending slavery through moral persuasion, political action, and public protest. William Lloyd Garrison. In 1831, Garrison began publishing The Liberator, a fiery anti-slavery newspaper. He called for the immediate and uncompensated emancipation of all enslaved people. Garrison's uncompromising stance and eloquent rhetoric electrified abolitionist circles and outraged Southern slaveholders. He also co-founded the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1833, one of the most important abolitionist organizations of the period. Frederick Douglass. Born into slavery in Maryland, Douglass escaped in 1838 and became one of the movement's most powerful orators and writers. His 1845 autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, became a bestseller and exposed the cruelty of slave. Douglass advocated for abolition not only as a moral imperative, but as a matter of American constitutional justice. He rejected gradualism and colonization, insisting that formerly enslaved people should be full citizens of the Republic. The Grimke sisters, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, daughters of a South Carolina slaveholder, became some of the first Southern white women to speak publicly against slavery. They moved north and joined abolitionist circles, linking the fight against slavery with the emerging women's rights movement. Their activism challenged both the institution of slavery and the patriarchal norms of 19th century America. These figures, and many others, formed a national network of lecturers, petitioners, writers, and organizers, making slavery not just a Southern concern, but a national crisis of conscience. Literature and its influence. Uncle Tom's Cabin. In 1852, the publication of Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, shook the nation and galvanized the anti-slavery cause. A moral wake-up call. Stowe, a Northern white woman, wrote the novel in response to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which required Northerners to return runaway slaves to the South. Uncle Tom's Cabin depicted the horrors of slavery through vivid characters and emotional storytelling, especially the spiritual strength of the enslaved Uncle Tom and the cruelty of slaveholders. Immediate impact. The novel sold over 300,000 copies in its first year and became an international sensation. It personalized slavery for Northern readers. many of whom had never seen slavery firsthand. The book outraged Southerners, who dismissed it as inaccurate propaganda and banned it in many states. Legacy. The novel had a profound cultural impact, helping to shift public opinion and energize the abolitionist movement. When President Lincoln met Stowe during the Civil War, he reportedly said, "So you're the little lady who started this great war." While apocryphal, the quote reflects the enormous influence of literature in shaping national consciousness. States' rights versus federal power, a fundamental American debate. From the birth of the United States, a central question haunted the new republic. Should ultimate authority rest with the national government or with the individual states? The Constitution attempted to balance these competing visions, but the issue was never fully settled. Over time, the struggle between states' rights and federal power became especially contentious in the South, where states increasingly used the doctrine of local sovereignty to defend slavery and resist federal authority. This debate escalated into crises that threatened national unity and laid the ideological foundation for secession and civil war. Jeffersonian and Jacksonian ideas. Two of the most influential early American presidents, Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, shaped the ideology of states' rights, though in very different contexts and with varying implications. Jeffersonian republicanism. Thomas Jefferson, the third president and author of the Declaration of Independence, was a staunch believer in limited federal government and state sovereignty. Jefferson feared centralized power would lead to tyranny, much like the monarchy the colonies had overthrown. His Democratic Republican Party advocated for an agrarian republic based on independent farmers, decentralized authority, and a narrow interpretation of the Constitution. Opposition to a strong national bank or expansive federal programs. Jefferson's response to the Alien and Sedition Acts, 1798, helped define the concept of states' rights. In the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, Jefferson and James Madison argued that states could nullify unconstitutional federal laws, a radical claim that would echo in later Southern arguments. Jacksonian democracy. Andrew Jackson, president from 1829 to 1837, was also a champion of the common man and skeptical of elite institutions. Jackson distrusted national banks and supported expanding political power to white male voters, regardless of property ownership. While Jackson upheld state authority in many areas, he famously clashed with South Carolina during the Nullification Crisis, a confrontation that revealed the tension within Jacksonian principles. Jackson's presidency was a paradox. He expanded executive power, yet claimed to defend local autonomy. His actions laid bare the limits of states' rights when they threatened national unity. A nullification crisis. South Carolina's rebellion. The Nullification Crisis, 1832 to 1833, was one of the earliest and most dramatic confrontations over states' rights, centered on tariffs and Southern resistance to federal economic policy. Tariff dispute. The Tariff of 1828, dubbed the Tariff of Abominations by its Southern critics, imposed high duties on imported goods to protect Northern industries. Southern states, especially South Carolina, felt the tariff unfairly targeted their economy, which depended on imported goods and cotton exports. South Carolina's response, led by John C. Calhoun, a powerful Southern politician, and Jackson's own vice president, South Carolina argued that the federal tariff was unconstitutional. A state had the right to nullify federal laws it deemed invalid. If forced to comply, South Carolina would secede from the Union. Jackson's reaction. Despite his support for limited government, Jackson rejected nullification as a threat to national authority. In 1833, he secured passage of the Force Bill, authorizing the use of military power to enforce federal law. At the same time, Congress passed a compromise tariff, easing tensions. The crisis ended peacefully, but the idea of nullification and secession was now embedded in Southern political doctrine. It was clear, when federal authority clashed with slavery and economic interests, states' rights would become the rallying cry for Southern resistance. Southern arguments defending states' rights. As the North grew in population, political influence, and anti-slavery sentiment, the South increasingly viewed federal power as a direct threat to its way of life, especially slavery. Political justifications. Southern leaders argued that the Constitution was a compact between sovereign states, not a grant of unlimited power to a central government. Therefore, states had the right to withdraw from the Union if the federal government overstepped its constitutional bounds. This argument would later be used to justify secession in 1860 to 1861. Defense of slavery. States' rights became synonymous with the right to maintain slavery. Southerners insisted the federal government had no authority to restrict slavery in the territories, interfere with slaveholder rights across state lines, e.g., via the Fugitive Slave Clause, abolish slavery without violating state sovereignty. In effect, states' rights were used selectively. Southern leaders supported national power when it protected slavery, e.g., enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act, but invoked states' rights to resist anti-slavery policies. Growing national control versus local autonomy. As America expanded and centralized, conflicts between federal and state authority intensified. Federal power expands. The federal government began to assert greater control over territorial expansion and the status of slavery in new lands, interstate commerce, infrastructure, and economic regulation. The enforcement of national laws, even in states that opposed them. Northern views. Many in the North came to believe that slavery was a moral evil and that the federal government had a duty to limit or end it. Abolitionists and moderate Republicans increasingly supported national legislation to block slavery's spread. Southern backlash. The South viewed these developments as proof of a Northern conspiracy to dominate national politics and destroy Southern society. By the 1850s, many Southerners believed that only complete independence could preserve their rights, especially the right to hold slaves. Conclusion. A nation at odds with itself. The long-standing debate between states' rights and federal authority became a key ideological battleground in antebellum America. What began as a constitutional disagreement over the scope of government turned into a philosophical and existential divide between North and South. In the North, federal power came to be seen as a tool for progress, reform, and unity. In the South, it was increasingly viewed as an instrument of oppression. As the federal government grew more assertive, especially on issues related to slavery, Southern states clung more tightly to states' rights as a shield for their institutions and values. Ultimately, when Southern leaders concluded that their rights, particularly the right to maintain slavery, could no longer be secured within the Union, they turned to the ultimate expression of state sovereignty, secession. Missouri Compromise and Kansas-Nebraska Act. 1. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, a temporary balance. As the United States expanded westward, the question of whether slavery would be permitted in new territories threatened to shatter the fragile peace between North and South. The first major crisis erupted in 1819, when the Missouri Territory applied for statehood as a slave state. At the time, there were 11 free states and 11 slave states, creating a balance in the U.S. Senate. Missouri's admission threatened to tip the scale in favor of the South, alarming Northern lawmakers who feared a pro-slavery majority. To avoid disunion, Congress passed the Missouri Compromise of 1820, brokered by Henry Clay. The terms included: Missouri would be admitted as a slave state. Maine, previously part of Massachusetts, would be admitted as a free state, maintaining Senate ballots. Slavery would be prohibited north of latitude 36 degrees 30 minutes in the remainder of the Louisiana Territory, with the exception of Missouri. This compromise temporarily diffused tensions and established a geographic boundary for slavery's expansion. However, it only postponed the inevitable conflict and failed to address deeper moral and political divisions. The Compromise of 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Law. 3 decades later, the U.S. faced another sectional crisis, following its victory in the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, which added vast new territories in the West. The central question returned: would slavery expand into the new territories? The Compromise of 1850, another effort led by Henry Clay, included several key provisions. California was admitted as a free state. The slave trade, but not slavery, was abolished in Washington, D.C. The Fugitive Slave Act was strengthened, requiring all citizens, including those in free states, to assist in the capture and return of escaped enslaved people. The status of slavery in Utah and New Mexico territories would be decided by popular sovereignty, letting settlers vote. While the compromise delayed conflict, the new fugitive slave law infuriated Northerners. It required them to participate in a system they increasingly viewed as immoral and unjust. Resistance to the law through activism, legal challenges, and the Underground Railroad further heightened tensions. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, repealing the Missouri Compromise. The fragile peace collapsed with the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, introduced by Senator Stephen A. Douglas. The act created the territories of Kansas and Nebraska, repealed the Missouri Compromise line 36 degrees 30 minutes, allowed settlers to decide the issue of slavery by popular sovereignty. The bill was seen in the South as a victory, but provoked outrage in the North. It opened land once guaranteed as free to the possibility of slavery and reignited fierce national debate. Bleeding Kansas and the collapse of compromise. Almost immediately, Kansas became a violent battleground. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers flooded into the territory, each hoping to sway the vote. The result was a period of bloody conflict known as Bleeding Kansas, 1854 to 1859. Armed clashes erupted between pro-slavery militias and free soilers. In 1856, abolitionist John Brown led a raid in retaliation for pro-slavery violence. Rival governments formed, one pro-slavery, one anti-slavery, plunging the region into chaos. Bleeding Kansas revealed that popular sovereignty was unworkable and that legislative compromises could no longer contain the sectional crisis. The collapse of the Missouri Compromise's boundary removed the last vestiges of national consensus on slavery's expansion and pushed the nation closer to civil war. Dred Scott Decision 1. Background of the case. The case of Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857, emerged from a long legal battle that began in the Missouri courts. Dred Scott was an enslaved African-American man who had lived with his enslaver, Dr. John Emerson, in several free territories, including Illinois and the Wisconsin Territory, now Minnesota, where slavery was prohibited under the Missouri Compromise. After Emerson's death, Scott sued for his freedom in 1846, arguing that because he had lived in free territory, he was legally free. The case went through multiple appeals before finally reaching the U.S. Supreme Court, where it became a national flashpoint in the sectional struggle over slavery. Supreme Court ruling and its national impact. In 1857, the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, issued a sweeping and controversial decision. In a 7-2 ruling, the court denied Scott his freedom and issued judgments with far-reaching consequences. The ruling included 3 key points. African Americans were not citizens and therefore could not sue in federal court. Residence in a free state or territory did not make an enslaved person free. The Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional, as Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery in the territories. By declaring the Missouri Compromise void, the court opened all Western territories to the potential spread of slavery, even those that had been considered permanently free. This decision nullified decades of political compromise, enraged Northern abolitionists, and emboldened Southern pro-slavery factions. Taney's opinion, African Americans not citizens. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, a former slaveholder from Maryland, wrote the majority opinion. His reasoning was deeply rooted in racism and reflected Southern ideology. Taney argued that African Americans, whether enslaved or free, had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. He claimed that at the time of the Constitution's drafting, Black people were not intended to be included as citizens and could not claim any constitutional protections. The opinion framed enslaved individuals purely as property, invoking the Fifth Amendment to argue that depriving someone of their slaves in federal territories was an unconstitutional seizure of property. Taney's ruling not only denied freedom to Dred Scott, but also stripped all Black Americans, even those living free in the North, of any claim to U.S. citizenship. Northern outrage and legal political fallout. The Dred Scott decision sent shockwaves throughout the North. Many Northerners, including moderates who had not previously supported abolition, were outraged by the ruling's implications. The decision invalidated decades of federal efforts to limit slavery's expansion. It threatened the legal status of free Black communities in northern states. Abolitionists and newly formed Republicans saw the ruling as proof that the slave power had seized control of the federal government. One rising political figure, Abraham Lincoln, publicly denounced the decision, warning that it was part of a larger effort to nationalize slavery. His opposition to the Dred Scott ruling became a central part of his arguments during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, 1858, and laid the groundwork for his presidential campaign in 1860. In conclusion, a nation further divided. The Dred Scott decision was one of the most consequential and inflammatory Supreme Court rulings in American history. Rather than settling the issue of slavery in the territories, it deepened sectional divisions, undermined the possibility of compromise, and accelerated the path to civil war. By denying the rights of African Americans and invalidating federal authority to limit slavery, the court aligned itself with Southern slaveholders and alienated much of the North. In doing so, it turned the judicial branch into a battlefield in the fight over the future of American freedom. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, 1859. Introduction, A Nation on the Brink. By the late 1850s, tensions between North and South had reached a boiling point. Slavery was not only a political issue, it had become a moral battleground that fractured the national conscience. Against this backdrop, one man decided to act. John Brown, a radical abolitionist who believed that slavery was a sin that could only be eradicated through force. His raid on Harper's Ferry in October 1859 was an explosive episode that terrified the South, thrilled many in the North, and became a powerful symbol of the deepening national divide. John Brown, the man and his mission, early life and religious convictions. John Brown was born in 1800 in Torrington, Connecticut, into a deeply religious and anti-slavery family. His father, Owen Brown, was a devout Calvinist who taught his children that slavery was a grave moral evil. This belief formed the bedrock of John Brown's worldview. Unlike many abolitionists who fought slavery through speeches, literature, and legal activism, Brown was convinced that the system would only fall through direct action. He saw himself as a modern-day Moses, tasked by God to liberate the enslaved, even if it required violence. Brown's understanding of Christianity was militant. He believed that shedding blood was necessary, even righteous, in the cause of freedom. Bleeding Kansas and radicalization. Brown's radicalism was sharpened during the conflict known as Bleeding Kansas, 1854 to 1856, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers clashed over whether Kansas would enter the Union as a slave or free state. In 1856, Brown and his followers killed 5 pro-slavery settlers in the Potawatomi Massacre, an event that shocked the nation and confirmed Brown's willingness to use deadly force. To his supporters, he was a warrior for justice. To his enemies, a terrorist. Planning the raid. Vision of a slave insurrection. A. The grand strategy. Brown envisioned a daring plan. Seize the federal armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, arm enslaved people in the surrounding area, and spark a widespread slave uprising that would spread across the South, dismantling slavery from within. He believed that once the first enslaved people were liberated and armed, others would follow, rising in a mass revolt. He saw the Appalachian Mountains as a natural stronghold for launching a prolonged guerrilla war against slaveholders. B. Support and secrecy. To fund his mission, Brown courted influential Northern abolitionists, later called the Secret Six, including Theodore Parker, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, and Gerrit Smith. These men provided money, weapons, and moral encouragement, though many later denied knowledge of Brown's exact plans. In preparation, Brown rented a farmhouse in Maryland, just a few miles from Harper's Ferry. He stockpiled weapons and gathered a group of 21 followers, including both white and black men, several of his own sons, and 2 fugitive slaves. The raid. Harper's Ferry, October 1859. A. The attack begins. On the night of October 16, 1859, Brown and his men crossed the Potomac River into Harper's Ferry. They quickly captured the federal armory, arsenal, and the railroad bridge. Several hostages were taken, including Colonel Lewis Washington, great-grandnephew of George Washington. At first, the raid went surprisingly well. Brown believed that local enslaved people would immediately join the rebellion, but that did not happen. The expected uprising failed to materialize. B. Local resistance and federal response. News of the attack spread rapidly. By morning, Virginia militia and townspeople had surrounded Brown's small force. A standoff ensued. By October 18th, the federal government, under President James Buchanan, dispatched U.S. Marines led by Colonel Robert E. Lee, who would later command the Confederate Army. The Marines stormed the engine house, now called John Brown's Fort, where Brown was holed up with the remaining survivors. In a matter of minutes, they crushed the resistance. Brown was wounded and captured. 10 of his men were killed, including 2 of his sons, and 7 others were captured. Trial and execution, martyr or madman. A. Legal proceedings. Brown was swiftly indicted for murder, inciting a slave insurrection, and treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia. His trial was held in Charlestown, close to Harper's Ferry, under tight security due to fears of rescue attempts or Northern retaliation. Despite his injuries, Brown participated fully in the proceedings. He used the courtroom as a platform to justify his actions. He denied he intended to commit violence against civilians and insisted he acted only to liberate the enslaved. B. Final words and execution. On December 2nd, 1859, Brown was hanged. His last written words, passed to a jailer, read, "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." These words would prove prophetic. His stoic demeanor, calm under pressure, and unflinching belief in justice impressed many Northerners, who began to recast him as a martyr rather than a crime. National reaction. Shockwaves across the country. A. Northern admiration. While mainstream politicians condemned the raid as illegal and dangerous, many Northern abolitionists were deeply moved. Henry David Thoreau, for example, compared Brown to Jesus Christ and Socrates, praising his moral courage. Brown became a symbol of self-sacrifice and resistance, especially among radical abolitionists and African Americans. Church bells rang in Northern towns. Memorial services were held. The image of John Brown, gaunt and defiant, entered American mythology. B. Southern horror and panic. To the South, John Brown was no hero. He was a terrorist, a madman, and a murderer. His raid struck at the heart of Southern fears, slave rebellion. The idea that armed Northerners might inspire enslaved people to rise up terrified slaveholders. Southern newspapers warned of widespread Northern conspiracies. Militant rhetoric increased. The slave power began arming itself. Militias formed. Forts were. Collapse of trust. The raid on Harper's Ferry marked a fundamental shift. Southerners no longer trusted the federal government to protect their interests. They viewed the Republican Party, though not directly involved in the raid, as morally aligned with Brown's goals. When Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who opposed slavery's expansion, was elected in 1860, many in the South saw it as confirmation that violent emancipation was the North's hidden agenda. B. Birth of Southern militancy. Brown's raid catalyzed the militarization of the South. In the months following the attack, Southern states passed laws to increase state militia funding. Slave patrols intensified. Secessionist rhetoric surged among Southern leaders who claimed they could no longer remain in a union that tolerated such fanaticism. The raid also widened the gap within the North. Moderates feared Brown's tactics, but more and more people were coming to believe that slavery was incompatible with the idea. John Brown's legacy. A. Symbol of resistance. John Brown's raid failed militarily, but succeeded symbolically. It forced the nation to confront the violence inherent in slavery and raised uncomfortable questions about justice, morality, and rebellion. The song John Brown's Body became a Union marching tune during the Civil War, later rewritten as the Battle Hymn of the Republic. His image was emblazoned in Northern newspapers, poems, sermons, and songs. B. Historical debate. Historians continue to debate Brown's legacy. Was he a terrorist who used unjustifiable violence, or a freedom fighter ahead of his time? Was he a madman or a prophet? What is clear is that Brown's actions shattered illusions of peaceful compromise. His raid didn't just ignite a building, it ignited a nation. Conclusion. The fire next time. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry stands as a turning point in American history. It showed that moral outrage over slavery had reached a point where words were no longer enough for some. It terrified the South, galvanized the North, and made war seem inevitable. As historian David Blight wrote, John Brown planted the seeds of emancipation, but he watered them in blood. The raid did not destroy slavery, but it forced America to reckon with it. And in doing so, it lit a fuse that would explode in civil war just 2 years later. Abraham Lincoln's election, 1860. The spark that lit the fire. The political landscape in 1860, a nation on the edge. By 1860, the United States was gripped by crisis. For decades, the issue of slavery had divided North and South, poisoned congressional debates, sparked violence in territories like Kansas, and created a chasm of mutual distrust. With the presidency up for grabs that year, the election became a referendum on slavery's future and the future of the Union itself. The major national parties, once bastions of compromise, were themselves falling apart under sectional pressures. The election of 1860 became a four-way race that reflected the fractured soul of the country. The fragmented parties, the Democratic Party, long the dominant force in American politics, split into Northern and Southern factions over slavery. Northern Democrats, led by Stephen A. Douglas, supported popular sovereignty, the idea that each territory should decide for itself whether to allow slavery. Southern Democrats, furious over Douglas's moderation, broke away and nominated John C. Breckinridge of Kentucky. He supported federal protection for slavery in all U.S. territories. The Republican Party, founded in the mid-1850s, had risen rapidly in the North. Its base was made up of former Whigs, Free Soilers, and abolitionists. They nominated Abraham Lincoln, a relatively unknown lawyer and former congressman from Illinois, whose debates with Stephen Douglas had brought him national fame. A fourth group, calling themselves the Constitutional Union Party, emerged from the remains of the Whig Party and conservative Southern moderates. They nominated John Bell of Tennessee and avoided the slavery issue altogether, hoping to preserve the Union by promoting the Constitution and rule of law. B. Regional tensions in the electorate. The election map in 1860 was not national, it was sectional. The North and West leaned heavily Republican, favoring free labor and the prevention of slavery's expansion. The South, seeing slavery as essential to its economy and culture, gravitated toward Breckinridge or Bell, deeply mistrustful of Lincoln and the Republicans. The stage was set for an electoral showdown that would determine the fate of the United States. The Republican platform: stop the spread, not immediate abolition. Despite Southern fears, the Republican Party in 1860 did not call for the abolition of slavery where it already existed. Instead, its primary goal was to prevent the spread of slavery into new territories. A. Key tenets of the Republican platform: no expansion of slavery into the Western territories, support for a protective tariff to promote American industry, free homesteads in the West for settlers, internal improvements such as a transcontinental railroad. The slavery issue, however, overshadowed all others. Republicans believed that if slavery were confined to the South, it would eventually wither away. They argued that the Western territories should be reserved for free white labor. Lincoln's moderate stance. Abraham Lincoln was chosen in part because he was moderate, not radical. While personally opposed to slavery, he did not call for its immediate abolition. He assured the South repeatedly that he would not interfere with slavery where it already existed, but he refused to support its expansion. In a famous line from one of his debates with Douglas, Lincoln had said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure, permanently half slave and half free." To the South, this was proof that Lincoln and the Republicans would eventually destroy slavery entirely. Southern perception of Lincoln: a direct threat to their way of life. In the Southern imagination, Lincoln's election represented not just a political defeat, it was an existential threat. A. The Southern worldview. The Southern economy was entirely dependent on slavery. Cotton was king, and enslaved labor powered the plantation system. But slavery was also deeply embedded in Southern society, politics, religion, and racial ideology. Southern leaders feared that if slavery were not allowed to expand, it would become economically unsustainable. Free states would outnumber slave states and dominate Congress, eventually passing constitutional amendments to abolish slavery. The Republican Party, despite its moderation, was a Northern tool that aimed to abolish the Southern way of life. Southern newspapers portrayed Lincoln as a black Republican radical, and some claimed his election would lead to race mixing, slave revolts, and the collapse of white supremacy. The failure of trust. Even though Lincoln had not yet taken office, Southern states were already planning for secession. To them, his election proved the Union had become dominated by anti-slavery forces, and they believed the constitutional system had failed to protect their rights. They viewed Lincoln's presidency not as a transition, but as a takeover. The election results. A sectional victory. A. Electoral and popular vote breakdown. On November 6, 1860, Abraham Lincoln won the presidency with 180 electoral votes, a clear majority of 152 needed, 39.8% of the popular vote. But here's the key. Lincoln did not win a single Southern state. In fact, he wasn't even on the ballot in 10 Southern states. His support was entirely Northern and Western. The other candidates. Stephen Douglas received 29.5% of the popular vote, but only 12 electoral votes. John Breckinridge won most of the South and secured 72 electoral votes. John Bell won 3 border states and received 39 electoral votes. The results confirmed what many feared. The United States was now 2 separate political nations sharing one flag. Secession. The immediate fallout of Lincoln's victory. South Carolina leads the way. Within 6 weeks of Lincoln's election, South Carolina seceded from the Union on December 20th, 1860. Its ordinance of secession declared, "The government of the United States has become destructive to the purposes for which it was ordained." South Carolina's leaders accused Lincoln of threatening slavery and trampling on state sovereignty. They believed secession was both a right and a necessity. B. The secession cascade. Over the next few months, 6 more states followed. Mississippi, January 9th, 1861. Florida, January 10th. Alabama, January 11th. Georgia, January 19th. Louisiana, January 26. Texas, February 1st. These states formed the Confederate States of America in February 1861, even before Lincoln was inaugurated. They selected Jefferson Davis as their president and adopted a constitution that guaranteed slavery's protection. Lincoln's silence and strategy. As president-elect, Lincoln refused to make any public promises or policy statements. He believed that any compromise would be seen as weakness and encourage more demands. He also did not believe secession was legal. In his inaugural address in March 1861, he stated, "The Union is perpetual. No state upon its own mere motion can lawfully get out of the Union." However, he also said he would not invade the South unless first attacked. This delicate balance would be shattered a month later when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in April 1861, starting the Civil War. The election of 1860, a turning point in American history. A. The end of the middle ground. Lincoln's election ended decades of compromise. No longer could politicians delay the slavery question or paper over differences. The North and South had chosen different futures, and the nation could no longer contain both. The election revealed the power of the North. which had grown in population and political strength. The fear of the South. That without political balance, slavery would be doomed. The collapse of national parties with regional loyalties taking their place. B. A revolution in political geography. For the first time, a party had won the presidency with no support from the South. This proved to the South that it was politically marginalized and that the national government could move forward without it. That realization, combined with decades of grievance and fear, led directly to the disunion of the United States. Conclusion: the calm before the storm. Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860 was more than just a political victory. It was the culmination of sectional tensions, partisan collapse, and ideological division. Though Lincoln took a moderate stance, the South saw in him the embodiment of Northern aggression. His election marked the final break in an already fractured nation. The secession of Southern states began before he even took office, and the slide toward war became unstoppable. As the sun set on 1860, the American experiment hung by a thread. The presidency of a tall, soft-spoken lawyer from Illinois would soon be tested by the bloodiest war in American history. The road to war, secession begins. South Carolina leads the way. By December 1860, the United States was at a tipping point. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who opposed the expansion of slavery, was seen by Southern leaders as a direct threat to their way of life and political influence. South Carolina, long a hotbed of secessionist sentiment, became the first state to act. On December 20th, 1860, its convention passed an ordinance of secession, declaring that the union between South Carolina and the other states was dissolved. South Carolina justified its decision through a secession declaration that echoed the language of the Declaration of Independence, claiming the federal government had violated its constitutional obligations, particularly by failing to protect slaveholders' rights. This argument rested on a theory of states' rights that allowed for the legal withdrawal from the Union, a theory rooted in Southern constitutional interpretation and bolstered by historical grievances such as the Tariff of Abominations and the Nullification Crisis. In the immediate aftermath of South Carolina's bold move, a wave of secession swept across the Deep South. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas seceded between January and February 1861. These states shared common motivations: a fear of abolitionist ascendancy, the preservation of slavery, and resentment toward Northern dominance in federal affairs. The secession crisis plunged the nation into chaos. Outgoing President James Buchanan insisted that secession was illegal, but also that the federal government had no constitutional authority to coerce a state back into the Union. This inaction only emboldened the secessionists and left the critical months before Lincoln's inauguration in limbo. Formation of the Confederate States. On February 4, 1861, delegates from the seceded states convened in Montgomery, Alabama, to create a new nation, the Confederate States of America, CSA. In only a few days, they crafted a provisional constitution, drawing heavily from the U.S. Constitution, but with several key differences. The Confederate Constitution emphasized state sovereignty, explicitly protected the institution of slavery, and limited federal authority. On February 9th, the convention unanimously elected Jefferson Davis, a former U.S. Senator from Mississippi and Secretary of War, as the provisional president. Alexander H. Stephens of Georgia was chosen as vice president. Davis had initially opposed secession, but once it became reality, he accepted the leadership role and vowed to defend the South's independence. The new government quickly moved to assert its legitimacy by establishing administrative offices, raising an army, and seeking recognition from foreign nations. Meanwhile, the remaining southern slave states, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri, had not yet seceded, hoping for compromise or at least for the North to make the first aggressive move. The Confederacy claimed it sought peace and independence, not war. But its seizure of federal forts, arsenals, and custom houses within its territory provoked mounting tension. Both sides were now in a dangerous standoff. Fort Sumter and the war's outbreak. The standoff between North and South reached a flashpoint in Charleston Harbor, where Fort Sumter, a federal fort manned by U.S. troops under Major Robert Anderson, became the symbolic and strategic test case for Lincoln's resolve. After his inauguration on March 4, 1861, Lincoln declared he would not initiate war, but would hold, occupy, and possess federal property in the South. The Confederacy, however, viewed any federal presence within its claimed territory as an act of aggression. Fort Sumter, surrounded by Confederate artillery, was running low on supplies. Lincoln faced a dilemma: resupply the fort and risk provoking war, or abandon it and appear weak, undermining his authority and Union resolve. On April 6, Lincoln notified South Carolina's governor that he would send a non-military relief expedition to resupply the fort. The Confederate leadership, led by Davis and his Secretary of War, Leroy P. Walker, decided to act before the supplies arrived. On April 12, 1861, at 4:30 a.m., Confederate forces under General P.G.T. Beauregard opened fire on Fort Sumter. After 34 hours of bombardment, Anderson surrendered. There were no deaths during the actual bombardment, but the attack electrified the North. Lincoln immediately called for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion, marking the official beginning of the American Civil War. This move caused a domino effect. Virginia, one of the most populous and influential southern states, seceded on April 17th, followed soon by Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. The war was now fully underway. Early Northern and Southern strategies. In the initial months of war, both the Union and Confederacy devised ambitious but flawed strategies based on their respective strengths and limitations. Northern strategy, the Anaconda Plan. The Union, under General-in-Chief Winfield Scott, developed the Anaconda Plan, a long-term strategy to economically strangle the South. Its key components included naval blockade, surround and cut off southern ports to prevent trade and resupply, control of the Mississippi River, divide the Confederacy in two and cut off internal supply lines, capture Richmond, take the Confederate capital to break political cohesion. Though mocked initially for its slow-moving nature, the Anaconda Plan would form the backbone of Union strategy throughout the war. However, Lincoln and his advisors also sought a quick military victory, believing a single strong blow could end the rebellion early. Southern strategy, defensive war, and foreign recognition. The Confederacy strategy relied on its vast size, commitment to defending homeland soil, and hoped for support from European powers, particularly Britain and France, whose textile industries depended on Southern cotton. Confederate leaders believed that a defensive war of attrition, combined with a few strategic offensives, could exhaust Northern will and resources. They also counted on internal divisions in the North and war weariness to force a political settlement. Confederate generals like Robert E. Lee and Joseph E. Johnston advocated a strategy of protecting critical railroads and ports while also being flexible enough to seize the initiative when opportunity arose. The South also attempted early offensives, such as the invasion of Kentucky and efforts to bring border states into the Confederacy. These efforts had mixed success and sometimes backfired by driving neutral states toward the Union cause. When the American Civil War erupted in April 1861, few on either side imagined the scale, bloodshed, and endurance the conflict would demand. Many believed it would be a short war, perhaps a few decisive battles followed by a return to normalcy. But as the months turned into years, the war revealed its true nature, a total, grinding contest of wills fought across vast fields, rivers, forests, and cities. At the heart of it all were the major campaigns and battles, epic clashes that would shape not only the military fortunes of the Union and the Confederacy, but the political future of the nation itself. From the chaotic debut at Bull Run to the thunderous cannons of Gettysburg and the smoky ruins of Atlanta, each engagement unfolded within a wider strategy, often influenced by political pressures, public opinion, and logistical constraints. The generals, Grant, Lee, Sherman, McClellan, Jackson, Longstreet, and others, would become household names, their decisions etched into history. Soldiers on both sides, drawn from farms and factories, bore the burden of brutal marches, hunger, and death. This part of the project explores the major campaigns and battles that defined each year of the war. Through these engagements, we see not just shifting tactical advantages, but the evolution of military doctrine, the rise and fall of morale, and the growing realization that the war would transform the United States forever. As the Union's industrial and manpower advantages began to assert themselves, and the Confederacy struggled under blockade and attrition, the battlefield became a crucible in which the fate of the Union and the abolition of slavery were forged. 1661, the First Battle of Bull Run, Manassas, prelude to battle following the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in April 1861. The newly inaugurated President Abraham Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the Southern Rebellion. The response in the North was overwhelming. Young men rushed to enlist, many believing they would fight a single battle and return home as heroes. In the South, the secessionist spirit surged. 11 states had declared themselves part of the Confederate States of America, with Richmond, Virginia, as its capital. President Jefferson Davis called up troops to defend the fledgling nation. The first real test of arms would come in northern Virginia, near a small river called Bull Run. The road to Manassas, Washington, D.C. was abuzz with confidence. Politicians, journalists, and citizens pressured Union General Irvin McDowell to strike quickly. Despite concerns about the inexperience of his troops, McDowell moved toward Manassas Junction, aiming to capture the railroad hub and open the way to Richmond. Facing him was Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard, who had assembled his forces along the banks of Bull Run. Reinforcements under General Joseph E. Johnston were en route from the Shenandoah Valley, thanks to a series of coordinated movements and the use of Southern railroads, the first time rail would play a major role in wartime troop movement. The battle. July 21st, 1861. McDowell launched his attack early in the morning, attempting a flanking maneuver around the Confederate left. Union troops initially made gains, pushing back Confederate lines. Civilians from Washington came out to picnic and observe, assuming a quick victory. But Confederate resistance stiffened. One brigade under General Thomas J. Jackson held firm on Henry House Hill, earning him the immortal nickname Stonewall. Johnston's reinforcements arrived just in time, tipping the balance. By afternoon, the tide turned. Confederate counterattacks threw Union forces into confusion. Panic spread, and what had been a battle became a chaotic retreat. Union soldiers fled back toward Washington in disarray, abandoning supplies and weapons. The Confederate victory was total, yet disorganized and costly. Aftermath and consequences. The First Battle of Bull Run shattered illusions on both sides. The North was stunned. This would not be a short war. Lincoln called for 500,000 more troops and began to understand the magnitude of the challenge ahead. The defeat forced a reevaluation of military leadership and training, leading to the eventual appointment of George B. McClellan to head the Army of the Potomac. For the Confederacy, the victory bolstered morale and confidence, but also encouraged complacency. Many Southern leaders believed that one or two more such triumphs would bring foreign recognition or force the North to concede. They were wrong. The war had only begun, and it would become far more terrible. Battle of Shiloh, April 6-7, 1862. Strategic context. As 1862 dawned, Union strategy began shifting westward. The goal was to seize control of the Mississippi River and divide the Confederacy. General Ulysses S. Grant, relatively unknown in 1861, had already captured Forts Henry and Donelson in Tennessee, earning the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant. Now he set his sights deeper into the South. Grant's army gathered at Pittsburgh Landing near a small Tennessee church called Shiloh. Waiting for reinforcements under General Don Carlos Buell, Grant underestimated the threat from Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnston, who was massing troops in Corinth, Mississippi. The Confederate surprise attack. On April 6th, the Confederates launched a surprise dawn assault. Union camps were caught off guard. Many soldiers were bayoneted in their tents. Confederate forces pushed the Union Army back toward the Tennessee River in chaotic fighting. The battle was confused, brutal, and marked by dense woods, smoke, and screams. By midday, Confederate momentum slowed. Fierce resistance formed at a location known as the Hornet's Nest, where Union troops under Generals Prentiss and Wallace held out for hours before surrendering. Tragically, Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnston was mortally wounded during the fighting. His loss would deprive the South of one of its best field commanders. Day 2. Union counterattack. Overnight, Buell's reinforcements arrived. On April 7th, the Union launched a fierce counterattack. With fresh troops and artillery support, Grant drove the Confederates back across the battlefield and reclaimed lost ground. By afternoon, the battered Confederate army retreated to Corinth. Shiloh became the bloodiest battle in American history to that point. Over 23,000 casualties in 2 days. Impact. The shock of Shiloh changed perceptions. No longer could either side cling to illusions of a quick war. The human cost was staggering. Grant faced heavy criticism for being unprepared, but Lincoln refused to remove him, saying, "I can't spare this man. He fights." Strategically, the Union began consolidating its hold on western Tennessee and setting the stage for future campaigns along the Mississippi. The Peninsula Campaign and 7 days battles, March to July 1862. McClellan's grand plan. Meanwhile, in the East, General George B. McClellan led the Army of the Potomac in a bold plan to capture Richmond by landing on the Virginia Peninsula between the York and James Rivers. McClellan, cautious and methodical, was loved by his troops, but distrusted by Lincoln for his political arrogance and slowness to act. Landing at Fort Monroe in March 1862, McClellan advanced slowly toward Richmond. Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston opposed him initially, but withdrew toward the capital. The siege of Yorktown and the road to Richmond. Instead of launching a direct assault on Yorktown, McClellan chose to lay siege, delaying the campaign for weeks. This allowed the Confederates to reinforce Richmond. As McClellan inched forward, Southern morale stiffened. In May, McClellan won the Battle of Williamsburg and neared the outskirts of Richmond. But Confederate defenses, marshy terrain, and McClellan's constant demands for reinforcements slowed his progress. He overestimated enemy strength and refused to risk bold attacks. Robert E. Lee takes command. On May 31st, during the Battle of Seven Pines, Johnston was severely wounded. Confederate President Jefferson Davis appointed General Robert E. Lee to command the Army of Northern Virginia. Lee, aggressive and audacious, saw McClellan's hesitance as an opportunity. In late June, Lee launched a series of coordinated assaults known as the 7 Days Battles. Though costly in casualties, Lee's attacks unnerved McClellan, who eventually withdrew his army from the gates of Richmond. Results: Lee had successfully defended the Confederate capital and shifted the momentum. Though the Union retained numerical superiority, McClellan's failure to capture Richmond allowed the Confederacy to fight on and emboldened Lee to take the war into Northern territory. Battle of Antietam, September 17, 1862. Lee invades the North. After his success on the peninsula, Lee went on the offensive. In September, he crossed the Potomac River into Maryland. His goals were ambitious: to resupply his army from northern farms, encourage Marylanders to join the Confederacy, and influence Northern public opinion before the midterm elections. A Confederate victory on Union soil could also prompt recognition from Britain or France. The lost order and McClellan's opportunity. Lee divided his forces, sending Stonewall Jackson to capture the Union garrison at Harper's Ferry. But fate intervened. Union soldiers discovered Special Order 191, Lee's lost campaign plans. McClellan now knew Lee's army was divided and vulnerable. But as always, McClellan moved too slowly. He advanced toward Lee's position near Sharpsburg, Maryland, where the Confederates took up a strong defensive position behind Antietam Creek. The bloodiest day in American history. On September 17, 1862, McClellan launched piecemeal assaults against Lee's lines. Morning. Union forces under General Joseph Hooker attacked the Confederate left near the cornfield, a patch of tall crops that changed hands multiple times in savage fighting. Artillery and musket fire turned the field into a slaughterhouse. Midday, Union General Sumner pushed into the center at Bloody Lane, a sunken road where Confederates were entrenched. The lane became a death trap for both sides, filled with bodies stacked in layers. Afternoon. Union General Ambrose Burnside attempted to cross the narrow Burnside Bridge, held by a small Confederate force on high ground. After hours of delay and repeated failure, Burnside's men finally crossed, only to be driven back by a last-minute Confederate counterattack led by A.P. Hill from Harper's Ferry. By nightfall, over 22,000 Americans were dead, wounded, or missing. The bloodiest single day in U.S. history. Stalemate, but strategic victory. Tactically, Antietam was a draw. Lee held his position, but was outnumbered and low on supplies. On September 18th, he withdrew across the Potomac, ending his invasion. McClellan, true to form, did not pursue aggressively, squandering the chance to destroy Lee's army. Yet the battle had immense strategic significance. President Lincoln seized the moment to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Framed as a war measure, it declared that enslaved people in rebelling states would be freed on January 1, 1863. This transformed the war from a struggle for union into a moral crusade for human freedom. It also ensured that foreign powers like Britain, where slavery was widely condemned, would not recognize or support the Confederacy. Summary of 1862. The second year of the war was marked by mounting casualties, missed opportunities, and shifting momentum. In the West, Union forces pushed deeper into the Confederacy with victories like Shiloh. In the East, Lee emerged as a bold and brilliant commander, frustrating Union efforts and inspiring Southern morale. But the cost was high. Antietam alone showed the war's escalating horror. And yet, from that carnage, Lincoln forged a new purpose, not just to preserve the Union, but to destroy slavery. The war's stakes and its human toll had grown immeasurably. The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st to 3rd, 1863, Lee's second invasion of the North. Buoyed by his victories at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, General Robert E. Lee launched a second invasion of the North in June 1863. His goals mirrored those of Antietam: relieve pressure on war-torn Virginia, seize supplies from Pennsylvania's farmland, sway Northern public opinion, and, if possible, win a decisive victory on Union soil to force peace or recognition from European powers. Lee's 70,000-strong Army of Northern Virginia marched into Pennsylvania. Opposing him was the newly appointed Union commander, General George G. Meade, who took command of the Army of the Potomac just days before the battle. Day 1. Clash at Gettysburg, July 1st. Confederate forces under A.P. Hill and Richard Ewell clashed with Union cavalry under General John Buford west of the small town of Gettysburg. Union reinforcements under General John Reynolds arrived, but Reynolds was killed early in the fighting. The Confederates gained the upper hand, pushing Union forces through Gettysburg and onto Cemetery Hill. But Lee, cautious of Union strength, held back a full assault, allowing Meade's army to consolidate. Day 2, Flanking and Fury, July 2nd. Meade's defensive line formed a fishhook shape on the high ground. Lee attempted to outflank both Union ends. On the Union left, Confederate troops assaulted Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the Wheatfield. Union Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain of the 20th Maine famously defended Little Round Top with a desperate bayonet charge, saving the flank. On the Union right, Ewell attacked Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill, but was repelled. Day 3, Pickett's Charge, July 3rd. Lee, believing the Union center was weakened, ordered a massive frontal assault, Pickett's Charge, against the center of Meade's line on Cemetery Ridge. 15,000 Confederate troops marched across open fields under a hailstorm of Union artillery and rifle fire. The charge was heroic but suicidal. Fewer than half returned. Union troops, shouting "Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg," took vengeance for their own earlier defeats. Pickett's charge failed disastrously, and Lee was forced to retreat on July 4th, coincidentally, the same day Vicksburg fell in the West. Aftermath: Gettysburg was the deadliest battle of the Civil War, with more than 51,000 casualties. Though Meade failed to pursue and destroy Lee's army, the Confederate loss ended major Southern offensives in the North. Lincoln later commemorated the dead in his famous Gettysburg Address, redefining the war as a struggle for a new birth of freedom. The Siege of Vicksburg, May 18th to July 4th, 1863. Why Vicksburg mattered. Vicksburg, Mississippi sat on high bluffs above a bend in the Mississippi River, commanding control of the vital waterway. Its capture would split the Confederacy in two and give the Union full control of the Mississippi, an essential part of the Anaconda Plan. Despite repeated attempts, the Union had failed to seize the city. In early 1863, Ulysses S. Grant embarked on a daring campaign to change that. Grant's bold maneuvers. Grant marched his army south along the western bank of the Mississippi, crossed the river below Vicksburg, and struck inland, living off the land. He fought and won several battles: Port Gibson, Raymond, Jackson, Champion Hill, pushing Confederate General John C. Pemberton into a defensive position inside Vicksburg. Grant then laid siege to the city in mid-May 1863. Life under siege. Vicksburg's 30,000 defenders and civilian population endured 46 days of constant shelling. Residents lived in caves dug into hillsides. Food ran low. Desperation spread. Grant's forces cut off all escape and reinforcements. Union naval forces under Admiral David Porter bombarded the city from the river. On July 4, 1863, Pemberton surrendered. Grant had taken 29,000 Confederate prisoners. Strategic consequences. The fall of Vicksburg was a crushing blow to the Confederacy. It effectively split the South in two, isolating Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Combined with the defeat at Gettysburg the day before, it marked a major turning point in the war. Grant's success earned him national fame and Lincoln's full confidence. He would soon be promoted to command all Union armies. The Battle of Chattanooga, November 23 to 25, 1863, the gateway to the Deep South. Chattanooga, Tennessee, was a key rail hub and gateway to Georgia. After the Battle of Chickamauga in September 1863, Confederate forces under Braxton Bragg besieged Union forces inside Chattanooga, threatening to choke off Union control of Tennessee. Union troops under General William Rosecrans were tracked. Lincoln sent reinforcements under Ulysses S. Grant, who took overall command. The Cracker Line and Union Revival. Grant's first priority was to open a supply line, nicknamed the Cracker Line, to feed the starving Union garrison. Once established, he reorganized the forces, brought in reinforcements under William Tecumseh Sherman and Joseph Hooker, and prepared for a counterattack. Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain. On November 24th, Union troops attacked Lookout Mountain in the battle above the clouds. Heavy fog and steep terrain made it dramatic and surreal, and the Union captured the mountain with minimal casualties. On November 25th, Grant launched a general assault on Missionary Ridge. Union troops under General George Thomas made a bold, unauthorized charge up the ridge and broke through Bragg's lines, sending the Confederates into full retreat. Result: Chattanooga was a decisive Union victory. It opened the door to Sherman's Atlanta campaign and march to the sea in 1864. The Confederates had lost control of Tennessee, and much of the Deep South was now vulnerable. Summary of 1863. The year 1863 was a turning point in every sense. The dual victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg broke Confederate momentum and lifted Union morale. The fall of Chattanooga set the stage for deeper Union advances into Georgia and the Carolinas. Moreover, the Emancipation Proclamation, issued in January, had begun reshaping the war's moral dimension. Over 180,000 black soldiers would eventually join the Union Army. The conflict was no longer just about preserving the Union. It was about transforming it. 1864. Grant versus Lee and Sherman's march to the sea. Ulysses S. Grant takes command. By early 1864, Lincoln promoted Ulysses S. Grant to General-in-Chief of all Union armies. Grant moved his headquarters to Virginia to directly oversee the campaign against Robert E. Lee and his Army of Northern Virginia. Grant's strategy was simple but grim: relentless pressure on all fronts. The goal was not merely to win battles, but to destroy Confederate armies, cut off supplies, and crush Southern will to fight. He would hammer Lee in Virginia, while General William Tecumseh Sherman pushed into Georgia. The Overland Campaign, May-June 1864. 1. Battle of the Wilderness, May 5 to 7. Grant crossed the Rapidan River into Virginia, where Lee struck him in dense, tangled forest known as the Wilderness. The thick brush nullified Union numbers and turned the battle into nightmarish close combat. Forest fires, sparked by gunfire, consumed wounded men. Result: inconclusive. Union casualties: 18,000. Confederate: 11,000. But unlike previous Union commanders, Grant did not retreat. He moved forward. 2. Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, May 8th to 21st. The armies clashed again at Spotsylvania, with savage trench warfare and assaults, including the horrific hand-to-hand fight at the Bloody Angle. Soldiers fought for 20 continuous hours in pouring rain. Result: stalemate with massive casualties. Grant again pressed onward. Battle of Cold Harbor, May 31st to June 12th. Grant made a direct frontal assault on heavily fortified Confederate lines at Cold Harbor, leading to disaster. In just under an hour, over 7,000 Union soldiers fell, one of the war's worst defeats. Soldiers pinned notes to their uniforms, identifying their names, expecting death. Despite this, Grant continued the campaign, moving south toward Petersburg, Lee's crucial supply hub. Impact of the Overland Campaign. Grant lost 50,000 men in a month. Lee lost 35,000, losses he could not replace. Though heavily criticized, Grant's approach was war of attrition, which Lee could not survive. The Union's greater resources were beginning to tell. Siege of Petersburg, June 1864, April 1865. Trenches and stalemate. Outside Richmond, Grant began a siege of Petersburg, targeting railroads feeding the Confederate capital. Both sides dug trenches stretching over 30 miles, a grim precursor to World War I tactics. The Battle of the Crater, July 30th. Union engineers dug a massive tunnel under Confederate lines, packed it with explosives, and detonated it, creating a giant crater. But poor planning followed. Union troops charged into the crater instead of around it and were massacred. The siege dragged on for nearly 10 months. Grant slowly cut Confederate supply lines while Lee's forces dwindled. Sherman's Atlanta Campaign, May to September 1864. Sherman's advance. In the Western Theater, General William T. Sherman launched an offensive to capture Atlanta, a vital Confederate transportation and industrial hub. Opposing him was General Joseph E. Johnston, who employed delaying tactics, retreating steadily while avoiding major confrontations. Sherman, frustrated by this Fadian strategy, engaged in continuous flanking maneuvers, leadership change, and the fall of Atlanta. In July, Confederate President Jefferson Davis replaced Johnston with the aggressive General John Bell Hood, hoping for bold action. Hood launched reckless attacks against Sherman at Peachtree Creek, Atlanta, and Ezra Church, each ending in costly Confederate defeats. On September 2nd, 1864, Sherman captured Atlanta. Fires engulfed the city. The fall of Atlanta was a massive strategic and political victory. The March to the Sea, November-December 1864. Total war begins. With Atlanta secured, Sherman launched his infamous March to the Sea, cutting a 60-mile-wide path of destruction from Atlanta to Savannah. Sherman's 60,000 men lived off the land, destroyed railroads, burned crops, and dismantled Southern infrastructure. The goal? Break the South's capacity and will to resist. He faced no serious opposition. Confederate forces were too scattered and weak to stop him. Psychological warfare. Sherman's march was psychological as much as military. His concept of hard war targeted not civilians directly, but the economic and psychological support structure behind the Confederate armies. His message to the South: "You started this war. We are here to end it." Savannah Falls. On December 21, 1864, Sherman telegraphed Lincoln, "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah." The 1864 election, Lincoln's crucial victory. By summer 1864, the war seemed endless. Casualties mounted. Northern morale sagged. Lincoln's re-election was in jeopardy. But the fall of Atlanta and Sherman's march revived hope. Lincoln defeated Democrat George B. McClellan, a former general who ran on a peace platform. Lincoln's re-election ensured that the war would continue until unconditional Confederate surrender, and that emancipation would remain central to Union war aims. Summary of 1864. 1864 was a year of unrelenting pressure and massive destruction. Grant bled Lee's army white in Virginia. Sherman shattered Southern infrastructure and morale in Georgia. Confederate hopes for victory or foreign recognition faded rapidly. The Union's dual approach, attrition in the East, devastation in the West, brought the Confederacy to the brink. The cost was staggering, but the endgame had begun. 1865, Appomattox and the end of the war. The Confederacy on the brink. By early 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing under the weight of Union pressure, economic ruin, and internal exhaustion. The South faced widespread desertions, starvation, and disillusionment. Confederate currency was nearly worthless. Transportation and communication networks were shattered. General Robert E. Lee was still defending Petersburg and Richmond. But his army was outnumbered, underfed, and increasingly surrounded. In the Deep South, Sherman had taken Savannah and turned his army north toward the Carolinas, continuing his campaign of total war. President Jefferson Davis still hoped for a miracle, perhaps a negotiated peace or a dramatic military reversal. But the reality was grim. The Confederacy was dying. Sherman in the Carolinas, continuing the march. In February 1865, Sherman left Savannah and began marching through the Carolinas, aiming to unite with Grant and crush Lee from both sides. His army faced harsher resistance than in Georgia, but remained unstoppable. They destroyed railroads, factories, and anything aiding the Southern war effort. Columbia, South Carolina's capital, fell on February 17th, and large parts of it burned. Though the cause of the fire remains debated, it symbolized the Confederacy's unraveling. In North Carolina, Sherman faced Confederate forces under General Joseph E. Johnston, recently recalled to lead a last-ditch defense. Grant breaks Lee at Petersburg, March to April 1865, the final push. Throughout winter 1864 to 65, Grant extended his siege lines around Petersburg, cutting Lee's remaining supply routes. On March 25th, Lee attempted a desperate breakout at Fort Stedman, a surprise assault that failed with heavy losses. Grant responded with a general offensive. On April 1st, Union forces under General Philip Sheridan won a key victory at Five Forks, breaking Lee's flank. The next day, Grant launched a full assault. Richmond falls. On April 2nd, Lee informed Jefferson Davis that Richmond must be evacuated. Fires and explosions rocked the Confederate capital as officials fled. Union troops entered the city on April 3, 1865, cheered by newly freed slaves. Lincoln himself visited Richmond on April 4th, walking the streets amid crowds of liberated black residents who hailed him as a savior. Lee's retreat and surrender at Appomattox. Flight west. Lee fled west, hoping to link with Johnston's army in North Carolina. But Grant pursued him relentlessly. Confederate troops were starving, barefoot, and surrounded. On April 6th, at Sailor's Creek, Union forces captured over 6,000 Confederates. Lee exclaimed, "My God, has the army dissolved?" His options were gone. The end at Appomattox Courthouse. On April 9, 1865, Lee met Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. The two generals, opposites in style and background, conducted the surrender with dignity. Grant offered generous terms. Confederate soldiers could return home with their horses. They would not be tried for treason. Officers retained their sidearms. Grant ordered his men to refrain from celebration, saying, "The war is over. The rebels are our countrymen again." Lee's surrender effectively ended the war in Virginia, though fighting would continue in pockets for several more weeks. The collapse of the Confederacy. Other Confederate surrenders. General Johnston surrendered to Sherman in North Carolina on April 26, 1865. General Kirby Smith surrendered the Trans-Mississippi Department on May 26th. President Davis was captured in Georgia on May 10th while attempting to flee west. By June 1865, all major Confederate forces had surrendered. The rebellion was over. The collapse of the Confederacy. Other Confederate surrenders. General Johnston surrendered to Sherman in North Carolina on April 26, 1865. General Kirby Smith surrendered the Trans-Mississippi Department on May 26. President Davis was captured in Georgia on May 10th while attempting to flee west. By June 1865, all major Confederate forces had surrendered. The rebellion was over. The human and material cost of war. The Civil War was the bloodiest conflict in American history. Final estimates vary, but over 620,000 soldiers died, possibly 750,000, including disease and accidents. Millions were wounded. Families were destroyed. The South lay in ruins. Cities burned, railroads twisted, plantations destroyed, and its economy devastated. Slavery was abolished, but the struggle for racial justice had only begun. Legacy of the war's final year. The Union was preserved. Slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment. The federal government emerged stronger, more centralized. The Southern social order, based on slavery and white supremacy, was shattered, though resistance to equality would persist for generations. 1865 was not just an end, but a beginning. The United States entered a new era, facing Reconstruction, racial turmoil, and the challenge of healing a broken nation. Conclusion: a nation reborn in fire. The final year of the Civil War was a relentless march toward total Union victory and Confederate defeat. Grant's unyielding campaign against Lee, Sherman's trail of destruction through the Deep South, and Lincoln's re-election and assassination all symbolized the immense transformation the country was undergoing. Though the Union was preserved, it was forever changed. The war had tested the nation's ideals, shattered its illusions, and paved the way for a new birth of freedom. The blood and fire of 1865 forged a different America, one poised to grapple with the promises of liberty, justice, and unity for all. Political leadership and decisions. Abraham Lincoln's presidency, steering a fractured nation. When Abraham Lincoln assumed the presidency in March 1861, he inherited a nation on the brink of disintegration. 7 southern states had already seceded, and more would follow after the bombardment of Fort Sumter. Lincoln's inaugural address was a careful balance, firm in Union preservation, conciliatory toward the South, and silent on immediate abolition. Yet, within months, he would find himself leading the nation through its greatest internal crisis. Lincoln's presidency was defined by a steady moral resolve, political pragmatism, and a capacity to evolve. Though a relatively inexperienced national politician, His leadership style emphasized clarity of purpose, moral vision, and political adaptability. As commander-in-chief, Lincoln oversaw vast military and political transformations, but always tethered his decisions to the goal of preserving the Union. Leadership style. Lincoln held an open-door policy, frequently visiting Union soldiers, consulting rival cabinet members, and directly engaging with Congress and the press. He encouraged debate within his administration, but made final decisions independently. He often clashed with generals, especially early commanders like McClellan, whom he considered overly cautious. Ultimately, Lincoln's choice of Ulysses S. Grant as general-in-chief proved decisive. Balancing liberty and necessity, Lincoln wrestled constantly with constitutional boundaries. He expanded executive power, sometimes unilaterally, arguing that extraordinary circumstances demanded extraordinary measures. His critics accused him of tyranny. His defenders saw him as a guardian of Republican government in crisis. Through it all, Lincoln was deeply aware of history's gaze. Once writing, "I am a firm believer in the people, if given the truth. They can be depended upon to meet any national crisis." Davis's background and personality. Jefferson Davis, the Confederacy's only president, was a West Point graduate, former U.S. Senator, and former Secretary of War, a staunch advocate of states' rights and slavery. Davis initially hoped to avoid war, but prepared diligently once conflict became inevitable. Compared to Lincoln, Davis was less politically flexible, often rigid in leadership, and prone to favoring personal loyalty over merit in military appointments. Challenges of Confederate leadership. Leading the Confederacy posed political isolation. Davis lacked Lincoln's political finesse. He failed to build coalitions or manage dissent effectively. Despite his deep commitment to the Confederate cause, his leadership became increasingly autocratic and isolated. His decision to continue the war into 1865, despite mounting losses, reflected both a personal stubbornness and an unwillingness to face the political reality of Confederate defeat. Emancipation Proclamation, a moral and strategic shift. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that enslaved people in rebellious states shall be thenceforward, and forever free. Though limited in immediate legal effect, it did not apply to border states or already occupied southern regions. It transformed the Civil War from a battle to preserve the Union into a moral crusade against slavery. Military and diplomatic significance. Emancipation served several purposes. It allowed the enlistment of black soldiers, strengthening Union manpower. It undermined the Confederate labor force, as thousands of enslaved people fled or sabotaged plantations. It discouraged European intervention, particularly from Britain and France, where abolitionist sentiment was strong. By altering the war's purpose, Lincoln made it politically impossible for European powers to recognize or support the Confederacy. Legacy. While limited in scope, the Emancipation Proclamation laid the groundwork for the 13th Amendment, which would permanently abolish slavery. It was a bold use of executive war powers and a defining moment in American history, reshaping national identity around freedom and equality. Suspension of habeas corpus, presidential action amid crisis. Early in the war, Lincoln authorized the suspension of habeas corpus, a legal safeguard against arbitrary detention. This allowed Union authorities to arrest and detain suspected Confederate sympathizers, draft resistors, and dissenters without immediate trial. The most controversial example was the arrest of Maryland legislator John Merryman in 1861, which led to the ex parte Merryman case. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney ruled the suspension unconstitutional, arguing that only Congress had that power. Lincoln ignored the ruling, asserting his duty to act decisively in defense of the Union. Balancing security and liberty, Lincoln later sought and received congressional authorization for the suspension in 1863. Still, his actions sparked fierce debate. Lincoln himself acknowledged the dilemma, famously asking, "Are all the laws but one to go unexecuted, and the government itself go to pieces lest that one be violated?" In retrospect, while controversial, the suspension reflected the gravity of the crisis and Lincoln's commitment to preserving constitutional government, even at the cost of temporarily bending its norms. Role of Congress and the Confederate government. Union Congress. The U.S. Congress, under Republican control for much of the war, played a critical role in wartime governance. Passed the Homestead Act, 1862, to promote Western settlement. Chartered the Transcontinental Railroad and created a national banking system. Imposed income taxes and issued greenbacks to finance the war, supported Lincoln's emancipation measures, and authorized the 13th Amendment, ratified after the war. Despite internal divisions, particularly among war Democrats and peace Democrats, Copperheads, Congress largely cooperated with Lincoln's agenda. Radical Republicans pushed aggressively for racial equality, sometimes ahead of the president's pace. Confederate Congress. The Confederate Congress struggled with governance. Its powers were limited by the Confederacy's commitment to state sovereignty. Governors like Zebulon Vance, North Carolina, and Joseph Brown, Georgia, often resisted Richmond's directives. Though it passed conscription laws and taxes, enforcement was weak. The Confederate Congress was plagued by economic dysfunction, public unrest, tension over central authority, lack of political unity. As defeat loomed, internal criticism of Davis's government increased. By 1865, the Confederate government had essentially ceased to function effectively. Conclusion: wartime politics in two nations. Political leadership during the Civil War was as decisive as battlefield strategy. Abraham Lincoln's presidency embodied the Union's capacity for moral clarity, institutional adaptation, and visionary leadership. In contrast, Jefferson Davis's administration, constrained by ideology and structural weakness, reflected the challenges of building a new nation amid total war. The Emancipation Proclamation changed the very meaning of the war. The suspension of habeas corpus tested the limits of liberty in crisis, and the actions of both the Union and Confederate Congresses shaped the war's economic, social, and political legacies. Ultimately, the Union's more cohesive political leadership, its ability to mobilize and adapt, and Lincoln's enduring vision were critical to victory and the birth of a new American order. Military structure, tactics, and technology. 1. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Infantry, the backbone of Civil War armies. The infantry was the principal arm of both Union and Confederate armies, constituting over 80% of the total fighting forces. Infantrymen typically carried muzzle-loading rifled muskets, such as the Springfield Model 1861, capable of accurate fire up to 500 yards. However, tactics had not caught up with technology. Commanders still relied on Napoleonic linear formations, emphasizing massed volleys and bayonet charges. This mismatch led to horrific casualties. Infantry formations were organized into companies, around 100 men, regiments, 10 companies, brigades, divisions, corps, and armies as larger structures. While drills and discipline varied, both sides relied heavily on volunteers with limited training, especially early in the war. By the later years, especially in the Union Army, experience and professionalism increased dramatically. Cavalry, eyes and ears of the Army. At the war's outset, cavalry was often relegated to scouting and raiding. Armed with sabers, pistols, and carbines, cavalry units were crucial for reconnaissance, screening infantry movements, harassment of supply lines, pursuit of retreating forces. The South initially held the upper hand with skilled riders like J.E.B. Stuart and Nathan Bedford Forrest, but by 1863-64, Union cavalry under leaders like Philip Sheridan had grown more formidable. Union cavalry units also began to use repeating carbines like the Spencer, giving them an edge in firepower and versatility. Artillery, thunder on the field. Artillery was a dominant battlefield force, both as a psychological and physical weapon. Each army had field artillery, moved with infantry using horse-drawn carriages, siege artillery, used in fortresses or long-term operations. Key types included smoothbore cannons, example, 12-pounder Napoleon, for explosive and canister shots. Rifled guns, example, Parrott rifles, with greater range and accuracy. Howitzers for firing shells at steep angles. Artillery was typically organized into batteries of 4 to 6 guns and attached to brigades or corps. Skilled gunners could deliver devastating barrages, and at battles like Gettysburg, concentrated artillery proved decisive. Railroads, the steel arteries of war. The Civil War was the first major conflict in which railroads played a central strategic role. The Union held a significant advantage with over 20,000 miles of track, compared to the Confederacy's 9,000 miles. Railroads allowed rapid movement of troops, delivery of supplies and munitions, evacuation of wounded soldiers. Union generals like Ulysses S. Grant and William T. Sherman mastered the integration of rail logistics into their campaigns. Sherman's Atlanta campaign was heavily dependent on his supply line via rail. The Confederacy, by contrast, lacked standardized gauges, industrial capacity to repair lines, locomotives, and spare parts. By late 1863, Southern railroads were collapsing under strain, contributing to logistical paralysis. The telegraph, instant command. The telegraph, invented just 2 decades earlier, revolutionized Civil War communications. President Lincoln regularly visited the War Department Telegraph Office to receive updates and issue commands. The U.S. Military Telegraph Corps, under Andrew Carnegie and Thomas Eckert, laid thousands of miles of wire across the Union front. Advantages included real-time battlefield updates, coordination between distant units, rapid strategic decision-making. The Confederacy had fewer telegraph lines and lacked the organizational infrastructure the Union developed. This deficiency limited Confederate coordination and responsiveness during campaigns. The telegraph, instant command. The telegraph, invented just 2 decades earlier, revolutionized Civil War communications. President Lincoln regularly visited the War Department Telegraph Office to receive updates and issue commands. The U.S. Military Telegraph Corps, under Andrew Carnegie and Thomas Eckert, laid thousands of miles of wire across the Union front. Advantages included real-time battlefield updates, coordination between distant units, rapid strategic decision-making. The Confederacy had fewer telegraph lines and lacked the organizational infrastructure the Union developed. This deficiency limited Confederate coordination and responsiveness during campaigns. The Union Navy grew from fewer than 90 ships in 1861 to over 600 by war's end. It employed steam-powered screw sloops and gunboats, ironclads like the USS Monitor, riverine gunboats on the Mississippi and its tributaries. By 1864, the blockade had largely succeeded, severely limiting Confederate trade, especially cotton exports. Confederate naval innovations. The Confederacy, lacking a major navy, turned to asymmetric warfare. Blockade runners, fast and low-profile ships that evaded Union patrols. Commerce raiders, like the CSS Alabama, which attacked Union merchant ships worldwide. Ironclads such as the CSS Virginia. Medical practices and battlefield conditions, brutality and improvisation. Civil War medicine was primitive by modern standards. Disease and infection killed more soldiers than bullets. Roughly 620,000 to 750,000 total deaths, with 2/3 from disease. Common killers: dysentery, typhoid, pneumonia, malaria. Medical knowledge was limited. Germ theory was still not widely accepted. Sterilization was rare, and surgical tools were used repeatedly without cleaning. Field hospitals were chaotic. Amputations were common due to the nature of mini ball wounds and lack of knowledge about antiseptics. Yet, survival rates for amputations were often higher than expected, thanks to rapid procedures and experience. Women and nursing women played an increasingly vital role in wartime medicine. Notable figures included Clara Barton, who later founded the American Red Cross; Dorothea Dix, Superintendent of Army Nurses; Sally Tompkins, the only female Confederate officer and renowned hospital administrator. Women provided care, distributed supplies, and ran hospitals. Their work permanently changed societal views of women in medicine. The U.S. Sanitary Commission and Improvements. The U.S. Sanitary Commission, founded in 1861, was a civilian organization that improved hygiene in camps and hospitals. It organized inspections, distributed supplies, and educated soldiers on cleanliness. Over time, survival rates improved. The Union's superior logistics also allowed for better provisioning of medical supplies, field hospitals, and ambulance services. Jonathan Letterman, medical director of the Army of the Potomac, revolutionized battlefield medicine by instituting an ambulance corps, TRI. Conclusion: a modernizing war. The Civil War marked a transitional moment in the history of warfare. It was at once a 19th century conflict rooted in horse, musket, and drum, and a harbinger of modern industrial war, characterized by railroads, telegraphs, ironclads, and mass mobilization. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery remained foundational, but evolving weapons technology made old tactics increasingly obsolete. Railroads and the telegraph redefined military coordination and allowed rapid responses across vast distances. Naval power and blockades played a strategic role, especially in the Union's ultimate victory. Medicine and battlefield care, though rudimentary, evolved rapidly under pressure, laying the foundation for future systems of emergency care. In sum, the Civil War's military structure, tactics, and technologies not only shaped the conflict's outcome, but ushered in a new era of warfare, one that would come fully into view in the world wars of the 20th century. Life during the war, civilian experience, North and South. The American Civil War was not only fought on battlefields, it reached into the homes, towns, and cities of millions of civilians. For both Northerners and Southerners, daily life was transformed by the strain of total war. While men went off to fight, families dealt with separation, loss, and increasingly harsh living conditions. In both regions, the war's long duration forced civilians to adapt to a world where survival, labor, and morale became national concerns. In the North, many civilians initially viewed the war as a noble cause to preserve the Union. Patriotic fervor was widespread in 1861, but as the conflict dragged on and casualties mounted, morale wavered. Urban areas like New York, Philadelphia, and Boston were hubs of military supply and production, benefiting economically from the war. However, the draft riots, most notably in New York City in 1863, exposed class tensions and resistance to conscription. especially among immigrants and laborers who resented fighting a war perceived to benefit the elite. Inflation was minimal in the Union, thanks to a robust industrial base and better financial management. But shortages of labor caused by enlistment led to disruptions in some industries and farms. Still, most Northern civilians were insulated from the physical destruction experienced by their Southern counterparts. In the South, the war came home in a literal sense. Battles raged across Confederate territory, and Union invasions brought devastation to towns, railroads, and plantations. Southern civilians endured shortages of food, clothing, medicine, and fuel due to the Union naval blockade and the South's limited industrial capacity. Prices skyrocketed, and Confederate currency collapsed in value. Daily life was marked by anxiety, deprivation, and displacement. Women and children bore the brunt of hardship, often fleeing advancing armies or watching their homes burned in horror. Campaigns like Sherman's March, Southern morale fluctuated with battlefield victories and defeats, and as the war dragged on, desertions increased, and public support for the Confederate government eroded. Role of women and children. The Civil War marked a turning point in the role of women and children, who stepped into responsibilities vacated by men at war. Their contributions were critical to both the Union and Confederate home fronts, and in many ways, the war accelerated broader social changes, especially in the realm of gender roles. In the North, women took on jobs in factories, especially in textile and munitions production. Others became nurses, teachers, and fundraisers. Women's aid societies were crucial in gathering supplies, sewing uniforms, and sending care packages to soldiers. Notable figures like Clara Barton, who would later found the American Red Cross, emerged as icons of wartime humanitarianism. Women also served as spies and couriers for both sides. Union and Confederate women alike risked their lives to gather intelligence or smuggle supplies. In Washington, Harriet Tubman worked as a scout and spy for the Union Army, continuing her lifelong mission of fight. Slavery. In the South, the absence of men created a labor vacuum that women had to fill. Southern women managed farms, plantations, and businesses. Elite women, many unaccustomed to physical labor, were forced to oversee agricultural operations with dwindling resources. Enslaved laborers remained the backbone of Southern agriculture, but many began to resist or escape as Union armies approached. Children also played roles in the war effort. In the North, they worked in factories or helped with family farms. Boys as young as 10 served as drummer boys or messengers on battlefields. In the South, children gathered scrap metal, ran family errands, or helped feed livestock. Many became refugees when Union troops advanced. Though often overlooked in official records, women and children were essential to sustaining society during the long years of conflict. Their stories reveal the war's deep penetration into the fabric of everyday life. Slaves and contrabands. The fate of enslaved African Americans was central to the Civil War. Their labor sustained the Confederate economy, and their status became a pivotal issue in Union policy and war aims. As the war progressed, hundreds of thousands of enslaved people seized the opportunity to escape bondage, actively undermining the Confederacy from within. Early in the war, the Union faced the dilemma of what to do with escaped slaves. In 1861, General Benjamin Butler coined the term contraband of war to describe enslaved individuals who fled to Union lines. Rather than returning them to their Confederate owners, the Union classified them as confiscated enemy property. This legal maneuver allowed the Army to protect them and eventually employ them. Contraband camps sprang up near Union Army bases, particularly along the southern coastline and in border states. Life in these camps was often difficult, crowded, unsanitary, and lacking sufficient resources. But for many men, enslaved people, they represented the first step toward freedom. In some regions, the Union organized freedmen colonies, such as the Port Royal Experiment in South Carolina, where African Americans worked land abandoned by Confederate planters. By mid-war, the Union's policies evolved. The Emancipation Proclamation, January 1, 1863, declared enslaved people in Confederate territory to be free, though enforcement depended on Union military control. More importantly, it opened the door for African American men to enlist in the Union Army. Nearly 180,000 black soldiers served in the Union forces by war's end, most famously the 54th Massachusetts Infantry. They fought bravely despite poor equipment, lower pay, and prejudice from white soldiers and officers. Their contributions were critical to the Union war effort and laid the groundwork for post-war claims to citizenship and equality. In the Confederacy, slavery remained official policy until the war's final days. Even as enslaved people, by fleeing, resisting, and fighting, helped destroy the very institution that had bound them. Prisoner of war camps, Andersonville, Elmira. One of the grimmest aspects of the Civil War was the treatment of prisoners of war. As the conflict intensified and prisoner exchanges collapsed, thousands of captured soldiers were held in overcrowded, unsanitary prison camps, some of which became infamous for their brutality and death tolls. Andersonville, officially known as Camp Sumter, was the most notorious Confederate prison, located in Georgia and opened in early 1864. It was built to hold 10,000 men, but swelled to over 30,000. Union prisoners were confined within a 26-acre open stockade, with minimal shelter, little food, and contaminated drinking water. Disease ran rampant, especially dysentery, typhoid, and scurvy. By the time Andersonville was liberated in April 1865, nearly 13,000 Union prisoners had died, more than a third of all held there. The camp's commander, Captain Henry Wirz, was later tried and executed for war crimes, the only Confederate officer to face such meant after the war. On the Union side, Elmira Prison in New York gained a reputation as the Andersonville of the North. Though conditions were generally better, the harsh winter of 1864 to 1865 and inadequate supplies led to severe suffering among Confederate prisoners. Out of the 12,000 men held there, nearly 3,000 died, mostly from pneumonia, malnutrition, and disease. A breakdown of prisoner exchanges in 1863 worsened the problem. Initially, both sides participated in a formal exchange system, but after the Confederacy refused to treat black Union soldiers equally, the Union halted the system. As a result, prison populations swelled and humanitarian conditions deteriorated. Both North and South used prison camps as tools of war, whether intentionally or by neglect, and their legacy stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of civil conflict. Conclusion. While generals plotted strategy and soldiers clashed in epic battles, the American Civil War reshaped the lives of civilians, women, children, enslaved people, and prisoners. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefield, permeating homes, towns, plantations, and even childhood. The total war experience forced Americans to adapt, suffer, and persevere. Women emerged as leaders and laborers. Children bore witness to violence and instability. African Americans transformed the war into a struggle for liberation, taking bold steps toward emancipation. Civilians endured hunger, grief, and upheaval, and prisoners, often forgotten in wartime narrative, bore silent witness to cruelty and despair. In many ways, the home front was as crucial to the war effort as the front lines. The experiences of ordinary people, though often overshadowed by military histories, offer a powerful testament to the endurance, tragedy, and transformation. Their stories help us understand not just how the war was fought, but how it was lived. African Americans in the war. Slavery before the war. Before the Civil War erupted in 1861, slavery had already deeply embedded itself in the economic, political, and social fabric of the United States, particularly in the South. Enslaved African Americans were treated as property, not people, and forced to labor on plantations, in households, and in industries without rights or freedom. By 1860, nearly 4 million African Americans were enslaved, primarily in southern states where cotton, tobacco, and rice production depended heavily on their labor. The system of slavery was maintained through legal structures and brutal enforcement. Families were often separated through sale, education was forbidden, and violence was a constant threat. Although abolitionist movements had gained traction in the North, with prominent figures such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and William Lloyd Garrison calling for emancipation, the federal government remained divided over the issue. The South saw slavery as essential to its economy and way of life, while many in the North viewed it as morally reprehensible, though not all were committed to full racial equality. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, on a platform that opposed the expansion of slavery into the territories, alarmed Southern leaders. Fearing a federal assault on their peculiar institution, Southern states began seceding, leading to the outbreak of war. Yet at the war's onset, the Union government under Lincoln initially fought to preserve the Union, not to end slavery. African Americans were not yet allowed to serve in the Union Army, and many Northern leaders feared alienating the border states that still practiced slavery. Runaways and contraband camps. As Union armies pushed into Confederate territory, enslaved people seized the opportunity to escape bondage. Many fled to Union lines, seeking freedom and protection. This posed a legal and political dilemma for Union commanders. Initially, the federal government had no clear policy for dealing with these escaped individuals. General Benjamin Butler, stationed at Fort Monroe in Virginia, took a bold step in 1861 by refusing to return escaped slaves to their owners, arguing they were contraband of war. This legal workaround prevented the Union from violating the Fugitive Slave Act while allowing them to harbor runaways. The term contrabands quickly became common, and camps began forming near Union military outposts to house the growing number of escapees. Life in contraband camps was difficult. Overcrowding, disease, malnutrition, and lack of shelter plagued many of these makeshift communities. Nonetheless, for thousands of African Americans, these camps represented a first step toward freedom. Many worked for the Union Army in non-combat roles, such as cooks, laborers, and teamsters. These contributions helped demonstrate their loyalty and value to the Union cause, and laid the foundation for eventual enlistment into the armed forces. Black soldiers in the U.S. colored troops. A turning point came in 1862 and 1863 when policies began to shift. The Second Confiscation Act and the Militia Act of 1862 allowed the Union Army to employ African Americans in military service, though initially in segregated and often menial roles. But it was the Emancipation Proclamation issued by Lincoln on January 1, 1863, that opened the door wide for African American enlistment. Following the proclamation, the Union formed the United States Colored Troops, USCT, an umbrella organization for black regiments within the Union Army. Over 180,000 African Americans would serve in the Union military by the war's end, making up about 10% of the entire Union force. Additionally, roughly 20,000 served in the Union Navy, which had integrated ranks. Despite their vital service, black soldiers faced rampant discrimination. They were often paid less than white soldiers, assigned to labor-intensive duties, and led almost exclusively by white officers. When captured by Confederates, they risked execution or enslavement, rather than being treated as prisoners of war. The massacre of black Union troops at Fort Pillow, Tennessee, in April 1864, where surrendering soldiers were murdered by Confederate forces under General Nathan Bedford Forrest, exemplified this brutal reality. Nonetheless, black soldiers proved their courage and capability in battle. Units like the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, famously portrayed in the film Glory, fought valiantly in major engagements such as the assault on Fort Wagner. Their bravery not only contributed to Union military success, but also helped shift public opinion in the North. The participation of black troops gave a moral clarity to the Union war effort, transforming it into a crusade for human freedom. Frederick Douglass and black abolitionists. Among the most influential African Americans during the Civil War was Frederick Douglass, a former slave turned author, orator, and tireless advocate for abolition and racial equality. Douglass was a powerful voice in pushing the Lincoln administration to embrace emancipation and allow black men to fight in the war. He believed that African Americans had the right to defend their freedom and that military service would earn them citizenship and equal treatment. Douglass met with Lincoln on several occasions, urging him to move faster on emancipation and recruitment of black soldiers. He also worked to recruit African Americans to join the Union cause, famously stating, "He who would be free must himself strike the blow." Two of Douglass's own sons enlisted in the Union Army. Black abolitionists, including Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, and Martin Delany, also played critical roles. Tubman, in addition to her work with the Underground Road, served as a scout and spy for Union forces in South Carolina. Delany became the first black field officer in the U.S. Army when he was commissioned as a major in 1865. These individuals were more than symbolic figures. They were essential actors in the struggle for freedom, equality, and the redefinition of American democracy. Conclusion: the role of African Americans in the Civil War was central, not peripheral. From the fields of the South to the battlefields of the Union Army, black men and women helped shape the course and meaning of the war. Their actions challenged the institution of slavery, demonstrated the will to fight for their own freedom, and began the long, unfinished journey towards civil rights and equality. The Civil War did not end racism, and it did not bring full justice to African Americans. But their contributions ensured that the war was not merely about preserving the Union. It became a fight for human liberation. In doing so, African Americans reshaped the very identity of the United States. The war's end and aftermath. Lincoln's assassination. The assassination of President Abraham Lincoln was one of the most shocking and consequential moments in American history. It occurred just days after General Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox, when the nation was still reeling from 4 years of brutal civil war. On the night of April 14, 1865, while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., Lincoln was shot in the back of the head by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and well-known actor. The president died the following morning, April 15th, plunging the country into mourning. Booth, believing he could revive the Confederate cause by assassinating the Union's key leaders, orchestrated a wider conspiracy. While Booth murdered Lincoln, his co-conspirators attempted to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William H. Seward. Though those attempts failed, Lincoln at a pivotal moment. He was the man who had preserved the Union and crafted the Emancipation Proclamation, and many feared that his death would unravel the fragile peace. Lincoln's successor, Andrew Johnson, lacked Lincoln's moral authority and political skill. While Lincoln had favored a moderate, reconciliatory approach to bringing the Southern states back into the Union, Johnson's policies would ultimately lead to a turbulent and ineffective period of Reconstruction. The tragedy of Lincoln's assassination was not only the loss of a national hero, but also the derailment of what might have been a more unified and just rebuilding of the nation. The surrender at Appomattox. The effective end of the Civil War came on April 9, 1865, when Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Army of Northern Virginia to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. The surrender followed a grueling campaign in which Lee's forces, short on supplies and surrounded, had been pushed to the brink of collapse. Although other Confederate armies remained in the field, Lee's surrender symbolized the fall of the Confederacy. The meeting between Grant and Lee was conducted with dignity and mutual respect. Grant, understanding the need for reconciliation, offered generous terms. Confederate soldiers would be paroled and allowed to return home with their personal possessions and horses. These lenient conditions helped pave the way for a smoother transition to peace and underscored the Union's goal of healing the nation rather than exacting revenge. In the weeks that followed, other Confederate forces surrendered. General Joseph E. Johnston surrendered to General Sherman in North Carolina, and by June, most organized Confederate resistance had ended. President Jefferson Davis was captured in May, and the Confederate government ceased to exist. The war, which had claimed over 600,000 lives and devastated much of the South, was finally over. The cost of the war: death, economy, rebuilding. A. Human cost. The American Civil War remains the deadliest conflict in U.S. history. Estimates of the total death toll range from 620,000 to 750,000 soldiers, with untold numbers of civilians also perishing from disease, starvation, and wartime violence. The toll was especially heavy in the South, where many towns lost nearly all their able-bodied men, and entire communities were decimated. Beyond deaths, hundreds of thousands of soldiers were wounded, many suffering amputations and lifelong disabilities. The psychological toll, what we might now call PTSD, was immense, but poorly understood at the time. Families were torn apart, and the social fabric of the country, particularly in the South, was left in tatters. Economic consequences. The Southern economy, heavily dependent on slave labor and agriculture, was left in ruins. Plantations were destroyed, railroads dismantled, and cities such as Richmond and Atlanta reduced to rubble. The emancipation of nearly 4 million enslaved African Americans obliterated the core of Southern economic productivity, forcing landowners and former slaves to grapple with a new system of labor. The Northern economy, by contrast, emerged stronger and more industrialized. Wartime demands had accelerated manufacturing and infrastructure development, giving the Union a significant advantage during and after the war. Nevertheless, the federal government was left with an enormous national debt, more than $2.5 billion, that would take decades to reduce. Rebuilding the nation. Reconstruction would be the monumental task of reintegrating the Southern states, rebuilding their economies, and protecting the rights of newly freed African Americans. The process was fraught with conflict, resentment, and violence. White supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan emerged to resist change, while Southern legislatures enacted black codes, to control the movement and labor of freed people. The Freedmen's Bureau, established in 1865, attempted to ease the transition by providing food, shelter, education, and legal aid to formerly enslaved people. However, its efforts were underfunded and resisted by local Southern leaders. Reconstruction would see moments of progress, such as the election of African Americans to local and national office, but it was also undermined by systemic racism and political compromise. By the late 1870s, with the withdrawal of federal troops from the South under the Compromise of 1877, many of the gains made during Reconstruction were reversed, setting the stage for nearly a century of Jim Crow segregation. Legacy of the 13th Amendment. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Civil War was the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which formally abolished slavery in the United States. Ratified on December 6, 1865, it stated, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction." The amendment codified the principles of the Emancipation Proclamation into law and eliminated slavery as a legal institution. It was followed by the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment, prohibiting denial of the vote based on race, forming the foundation of what would become the Reconstruction Amendments. The 13th Amendment was a historic milestone, but its implementation faced fierce resistance. Southern states enacted laws and used violence to restrict African Americans' newfound freedom. Moreover, the loophole allowing involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime was exploited through black codes and convict leasing, laying the groundwork for systemic racial injustice in the American legal system. Nevertheless, the 13th Amendment remains a turning point in American history. It fundamentally redefined citizenship, civil rights, and national identity. It marked a moral and constitutional rebirth of the nation, aligning the United States more closely with its founding ideals of liberty and equality. Reconstruction and long-term impact. In the aftermath of the Civil War, the United States faced the monumental task of reuniting a fractured nation and addressing the rights of nearly 4 million freed African Americans. This period, known as Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877, was marked by profound political struggle, social upheaval, and contested visions for the future. Presidential Reconstruction, led by President Andrew Johnson, sought a lenient approach toward the former Confederate states, allowing them to rejoin the Union with minimal conditions. However, this leniency angered many in Congress, especially radical Republicans who pushed for radical Reconstruction, a more aggressive effort to transform Southern society, guarantee civil rights, and punish the former Confederacy. Southern states quickly passed black codes, restrictive laws designed to limit the freedom and economic mobility of African Americans. In response, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and later the 14th Amendment, granting citizenship and equal protection under the law to all persons born in the U.S. The 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, aimed to secure voting rights for black men by prohibiting racial discrimination in voting. Despite these legal protections, white supremacist backlash was fierce. The Ku Klux Klan and other terrorist groups emerged to intimidate and violently suppress black political participation. Federal intervention helped curb the violence temporarily, but the commitment to Reconstruction weakened over time. By 1877, federal troops were withdrawn from the South as part of a political compromise, marking the end of Reconstruction. Southern states quickly imposed Jim Crow laws, institutionalizing racial segregation and disenfranchisement. Though Reconstruction had laid the constitutional foundation for civil rights, its premature end allowed white supremacy to dominate the South for nearly a century. The long-term impact of Reconstruction remains central to America's ongoing struggle with race, equality, and justice.